Welcome to the Care for Pastors podcast, where we walk alongside pastors and their families through the unique challenges of ministry with care, compassion, and hope. I'm your host, Robbie Bolden. In today's episode, we're exploring a story that reflects a reality that many ministry leaders face, but few talk about openly: the deep pain of trials and the journey towards healing. Today, we hear from Shane Becton. He's the pastor of New Life Seacoast Church in Rochester, New Hampshire. He and his wife, Holly, have been married for 30 years, and they have two beautiful daughters. Shane has been in local church ministry for over 30 years, and in 2019, he moved to New Hampshire to serve in one of the Northeast's largest multi-site churches as a campus pastor. Shane's a pastor who has faced one of the most difficult seasons of ministry, a time marked by online accusations, broken trust, and the emotional weight of leadership under fire. As the situation escalated, Shane found himself isolated, angry, and grieving, and the pressure eventually led him to resign his pastoral role, entering a season of loss and uncertainty. It was his wife's encouragement that pushed him to reach out for help, and that step changed everything. Through his connection with Care for Pastors, Shane began to confront the pain rather than bury it. He processed anger and slowly discovered that healing requires honesty, vulnerability, and community. In this episode, Shane shares a candid lesson learned along the way: the need for emotional and spiritual readiness, the value of wise counsel and mentorship, and the importance of creating a supportive culture within ministry leadership. He reminds us that even in the darkest moment, hope can be found, one honest conversation at a time. If you're navigating your own season of trial, if your leadership feels heavy, or you're carrying unresolved hurt, this conversation is for you. Shane's story is a reminder that processing pain is not weakness, it's the path to strength. And surrender control to God often opens the door to unexpected joy. Now join me for my conversation with Shane Becton. Shane Becton, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Robbie. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, Shane, we've been connected together for about a couple years now.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been really good to see
Yeah.
God work through you and your journey over the last couple of years. And I'd like for us to start out today just talking about how you came to connect with Care for Pastors and myself.
Yeah. Originally, my wife is the one that informed me about Care for Pastors. Her and Rodetta have a long relationship and friendship, and uh, they knew each other. And then, like you said, a couple years ago, ministry hit a really rough patch. I went through one of the most difficult periods of my life, both professionally and personally. And it was at that time my wife, Ollie, encouraged me to reach out. She had been, I didn't know, but she had been talking with Rodetta behind the scenes and just giving her a few updates of what we were going through in ministry. And she was encouraged. Shane needs to reach out. There are people here that can help him. And Holly, my wife, gave me that information, but man, I was just I was very untrusting of people at that time.
Right.
Um, I didn't know who to reach out to, nor did I really want to. It was just it was a rough period, but I it was one day I was driving around town, and I believe I sent you a text. I had been given your name and number, and I sent you a text and said, "This is Shane Becton. I'm reaching out." And you responded immediately, "Call me." It was just two words, "Call me." And so I pulled over in this abandoned parking lot, and it was a winter day. It was, late February, early March, I believe. And so it was just gray and cold, and um, when I did call you, you picked up and you said, "I've been waiting on you. I've been waiting on you to call." And I said, "Well, it's taking me some time. I need to catch my breath." And we just began a conversation um, that has brought us to today. And I am so grateful that I that I reached out. That is one of those moments I look back on my journey, and sometimes you place these flags along the way where it's like I'm going to remember that day and I'm going to honor that day, and that was one of those moments for sure.
Now, Shane, now you live in the Boston area, right?
Yeah, we're in New Hampshire. We're about an hour north of Boston, so we're in the New
Okay.
England area.
Okay. So it's pretty cold there,
Yep.
and physically and sometimes spiritually, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. It's warming up a little bit spiritually, but it's still cold physically.
Yeah. Now you were part of a large church there that had a strong network. Why don't you tell us a little bit
Yep.
about that and kind of how you got to that parking lot?
Yep. So originally, I am from the South. I was born and raised in the South, and I've been in ministry for a number of years. And my background is student ministry, family ministry. But after years and years of doing that, I felt a little bit like I was aging out, and also my passions were changing. My leadership passions and leadership desires were changing. So initially, that's what brought us to the New England area. It wasn't anything that we were trying to, jump into a large church or jump into a large multi-site church. I really had no clue of multi-site world or anything like that. I knew about it, friends of mine, but personally, I never have and lived it. And we moved here in 2019, and I consider it was just a wonderful move professionally. My girls, obviously, they had a little more difficult time with it, moving from the south to the north. It was a big transition for our family, but we settled in, and I was serving at again a multi-site church where I was the campus pastor, overseeing the location, overseeing the main broadcast location. And then from there, I advanced into an executive role where I had the opportunity to oversee all of our campus pastors and really just kind of pour into those guys. I'm an older guy, and they're a little bit younger, and so I felt like I had some wisdom and some lessons that people had taught me that I could pass along. And so we were operating really, really well for a few years. I enjoyed my time where I served. I enjoyed the staff. It really, there were a lot of benefits to it. A lot of challenges as far as doing multi-site, but a lot of benefits that I still am grateful for today. Um, and then all of a sudden, it felt like some things were creeping in. There, most notably, I think it was around Thanksgiving. I had received a call that there were some things being posted online about our church. And, I mean, we live in this online culture. We live in
Right.
everything's being reviewed, and everybody's got something to share. And so there's a lot of keyboard warriors that, will type these things. And it really didn't alarm me until I felt like it was picking up a little steam getting towards Christmas. And some of the accusations were coming from some former staff, many people that I did not know, that were saying some things about the church that we served, about the leadership. But it was very foreign to me because it was not my story. It wasn't anything that I had experienced while I was serving on staff. Um, it was not anything that I have ever encountered while I was serving there. So it was a little bit confusing, but it began just to pick up a lot of momentum. And there's I refer to it as you don't have to be guilty or innocent. You just have to be accused in the public's eye. And I
Right.
think it can pick up like a firestorm. A lot of people that are retweeting, reposting, and they really don't know the behind the scenes. They really don't even know the people involved. They're just posting something that sounds salacious or sounds, very, very controversial. But it picked up a lot of momentum. And, without going into a lot of the details, fast forward to January. of the following year.
What year was that?
Um, let's see, this is 20, it says 2023.
Okay.
Um, and I had some conversations with our leadership team. We were just trying to put a plan of action together. How do we confront this? Do we stay silent? We were seeking outside help from people that were in larger churches, bigger settings than us, and one of their suggestions was just to stay silent for now. And so we did, but internally, you're trying to make some decisions, trying to, make some moves that will not push it under the rug, but how do we deal with this in a multi-site setting when there's churches that are all over the state? And how do we communicate? How do we go out front? Ultimately, it led to our leadership resigning. And the reason that they did that is because they felt maybe that will um, take away the quote unquote heat from the story, and that they could just do some things behind the scenes and maybe address those things behind the scenes. But all of a sudden, I found myself as a campus pastor, no leadership, so no senior leader, um, and there's 7 locations, and including myself, 4 campus pastors that are left.
So let me get this straight. They thought the solution was to up and resign and not deal with the conflict or the negative press, so to speak.
Well, the solution was to resign, not necessarily not deal with the press, because again, when you're being, I mean, people are reaching out locally, local press are reaching out, national press is reaching out. It's a very vulnerable situation, and getting phone calls. I'm a private person anyway, and so I'm thinking, how do these people get my number? How do they know where I am? And so there's a violation there. You feel initially, because you're in protective mode. You're in like, hey,
Right.
what's going on? I'm being blindsided here, and then all of a sudden these people are reaching out. I don't want to say anything to anybody, not because I'm trying to hide anything, but because I don't know you. I don't know these people. I don't know what their angle is. I don't know what they're trying to do. Are they going to try to take my words and twist it? And so our leadership felt the same way. And it was one of those situations, because there were attacks being made directly towards the leadership. They felt, well, if we resign, maybe it goes away. And it didn't. I mean, it still continued. And looking back, everything is very, very clear years down the road when you can look backwards. Looking back, I don't know that we would make that same decision. Maybe things would work out differently if we would approach it differently, but we only had the information right in front of us. None of us had been through that. Part of the isolation that we felt is we didn't know any other church that had gone through this. Um, with exception of one, and they were not in existence. And so you just feel like you're the lone man on an island, and you got to make these big weighty decisions. And after they resigned, like I said, there were 4 of us that were left, and we were just kind of beat up emotionally, beat up spiritually. We were worn out. It was a very, very grueling few weeks. You're seeing your church being attacked. You're seeing your friends that are hurt. You're confused by what you're hearing. What is true? What is not? Who do I trust? Where do I go? Who can I talk about this with? That's all professional stuff. Now you got your family that's riding along with you, and they're confused. I had teenage girls that are questioning, like, these are supposed to be Christians. Why are they acting like this? And I mean, it was just a lot that was
Yeah.
happening. And plus, you have to make these big decisions that direct the future of this church. And leadership had resigned, and it was us. It was just
Yeah.
us that was left. And I just didn't. I didn't have fight in me.
Right.
There was fear. There was, I don't know what to do. This is not what I felt like I was called to do as far as my calling of being hey, you're now going to lead this multi-site church as a senior leader. I was willing to, but I was like, God, is like, really? I mean, I've been family ministry guy. I've been executive guy leading other guys for the past few years. Like, this is how we're going to kind of walk this journey now. And so ultimately, um, some of the guys that were with me, they were questioning, do they stay? Do they go back home? Because none of us were originally from New England. And we just ended up having to make decisions that was best for us personally. So I resigned. Um, and that's where everything really just it felt pretty dark and during that time. As
Uh,
I
bef-
said,
let me ask you a question.
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but
no,
I think it's
please.
really important for us to hear what was being said and was it true? Because you said you're blindsided. Obviously, you didn't see what they saw,
Yeah,
or did you?
no, I did not. Um, a lot of the accusations the ones that I heard, dealt with some of the kind of the antics that will happen in an office. You've got an office of maybe, 10, 12, 15 people, and some of the practical jokes that we might play on each other, or some of the ways that we kind of goof around to kind of help the day go along. Those were some of the accusations that people's feelings were hurt. People were felt ostracized and isolated when those things would happen. And again, I'm not discounting their feelings. um Looking back on some of the uh accusations, this staff at that time was very young, and they were very immature in a leadership sense, and they admit that, they know that, they recognize that. So and I think anybody leading this, or anybody listening to this podcast, how you lead an organization when you're 30 and how you lead it when you're 40 can be, and arguably should be, different.
Right.
Your maturity is going to increase, and the decisions and things that the environment that you create is going to be a little bit different in those situations. And um, so you have some people that were, again, these were accusations from probably 6, 7, 8 years prior to my arrival,
Mm-hmm.
that now we're coming out for whatever reason, and people felt like they needed to voice that, and felt like that needed to be heard. And um but those were the accusations. I didn't see that. I mean, our staff, we had a good time and we joked around, and but while I was there, there was no singling out people. There was no anything that was done to hurt people's feelings. It was all in just good-hearted fun.
Now,
And
now, Shane, you said something that was really important, and I want to go back to that. You said leading in your 30s is different than leading in your 40s.
mhm.
Having looked back, now I think it's really important for young pastors, right? As a young pastor, looking back over what you've experienced and what you've seen, what could have been some of the things that a younger pastor could have done to prevent some of that hurt?
um I will say that if it was me leading, that's the
Mm-hmm.
only way that I know how to answer that question. If it
Sure.
was me leading now, um, I would probably adjust the line a little bit, where jokes aren't taken too far. Um, just again, we created a culture that was laid back, and we created a culture that was celebratory, and we created a culture that was really relaxed. But um, I, if I had to recreate the culture now, I would probably adjust the line a little bit. As far as how relaxed are we? Um, I think taking into account how, some people can take a joke and some people can't.
Right.
Some people don't know when you are joking and when you're not. And so I think you do have to take that into account a little bit. Not everybody is going to get the joke. And you just have to be aware of that on staff. Some people are a little more serious than others. And so just being aware of those personalities, and recognizing, okay, we're walking into a meeting that has the entire staff, and we need to approach that differently than a meeting that has just the executive team. The executive team normally, or the senior leadership, normally they're a lot closer. They've been together a lot longer. You know them better. And so I think you just have to kind of put your finger in the wind and realize, what environment am I in right now, and just take that into consideration.
Yeah. Do you think spiritual maturity had a lot to do with the behavior?
Sure, sure. I think there's definitely a maturity all the way around. And again, in conversations that I've had just personally, I think everybody involved recognizes that. There's just, again, time is our friend in those
Hmm.
situations, because
Right.
it does allow us to age and it does allow us to mature. And I think, really honestly, when I arrived, there were lessons that were learned, maybe the hard way, that had been put into place. Because again, these things were not my experience. So there was change, a great deal of change in, just how things were done while we were in office, while we were all together. So I think that's another kind of a leadership nugget. Not only are you maturing, but you're creating change within your organization. And sometimes that change comes based on learning the hard way, or based on making mistakes.
Hmm.
I think the problem is we don't allow leaders to make mistakes. We don't allow organizations to make mistakes. If they don't learn from it and nothing changes, okay, that's another conversation. But when something changes and an organization changes, yet you haven't been there in 5, 6, 7, 8 years to see the change, but you're going to throw rocks, that's the problem that I have.
Hmm.
Because you're, you know, you're voicing some things that, again, was not my experience. I'm just speaking for me,
Sure.
my
I get it.
perspective and vantage point. But
Yep. Now, the lead pastor was a nationally known pastor and had been on several high profile podcasts.
yep.
Do you think leadership and responsibility at that age, what are the pitfalls of that? Obviously, we've seen the results of it, but what happens to that leader?
Um, Help me understand what happens to that leader.
Yeah, what I think the question I want to ask is, what can a young leader learn from that person's mistakes?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
that's a lot of responsibility and opportunity at a really young age, right?
yeah, it really is. However, I don't necessarily think that it's wrong, and I don't think you're saying that it's wrong. I think
Yeah.
when it comes, it's just how do you deal with it at a young age? Because
Yeah.
over
Because
the past,
here's what I'm trying to do is there's some young leaders who are listening today,
yeah,
and God's going to open up the doors of their congregation,
Yeah.
and they're going to experience some incredible growth.
Yeah.
I went through that as a young pastor, and 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 I wasn't emotionally, spiritually ready for that.
Yeah.
It really threw me back. And so, what were some lessons that could have been learned for that young pastor that would that would prevent this from happening?
I think well, I think everything was in place. What I'm going to tell you was in place from what
Okay.
I saw. But I would encourage if there's, a young pastor facing that today, um you nailed the first thing. Emotionally and spiritually, you have to be in a solid place to understand that God's given you a platform, and maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a radio show, TV show, whatever. God's given you that platform, and that you use that for his glory, not yours,
Hmm.
not to grow your Instagram or Twitter or whatever, not to get that verified check mark. I think you constantly, just people in general, we're going to have to constantly keep that in balance, because it can very quickly turn to become about me rather than he.
Hmm.
And it can just be one of those things that shifts. I mean, there's a whole green room culture, and there's this whole, celebrity pastor type of situation that some people aspire to attain. And it does come with some pitfalls and traps. And those pitfalls and traps really kind of birth within our heart,
Hmm.
because we're still, even though we're saved, God's still working on us. And there's a sanctification process that is happening within our hearts. And I know me, I would have to keep that in check. The second thing that I would encourage someone to do is make sure you've got somebody older and wiser that is in your corner, and that you've given that person permission to say anything. And
Hmm.
again, these are things that I saw that were in place.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's our responsibility to listen, to heed those warnings, to kind of lean into that, to not. I mean, there's this whole battle. Do we have this figured out? Do we know better than the person giving me advice? And you're going to wrestle with those things.
Right.
But I would just encourage, you got to push the pause button and kind of slow down and make sure your heart's in the right place, that people that are around you, they're going to keep you and hold you accountable. Because I go back to what I said earlier: whether you're guilty or innocent, people don't listen to that. If you're accused, that's what catches
Right.
fire. That's what sparks and can really do a lot of damage.
Right. Good. Good. Thank you for that. I know it's a little diversion, but I just didn't want to miss that truth that I knew that you could share with us this morning. So back to the resignation. So you guys got together. You decided to resign. Is that how it
Yeah.
went down?
Yeah, I mean, we had a council of people that came in. There were kind of an outside council of people, and again, keep in mind, even though I'd been here since 2019 and is roughly 4 years or so, I was still kind of new to this area. I arrived in 2019, and then COVID hit in 2020, and we were shut down just like the rest of the world. And so it's not like I'm out networking with people,
Right.
or I'm not, attending these pastors' conferences or anything like that. We were just trying to survive as a church, much like the rest of your listeners. And so
Right.
when we started opening up again, and then, this comes, I didn't know who these people were that were sitting around trying to help us. They had great hearts, and they have a heart for seeing healthy churches in New England, but I still didn't know who they were. And I just knew that they were trying to help us through, because we were not necessarily from here. And we were in that kind of middle management. That's a rough place. That's a rough place to be sometimes, because you're speaking and leading people below you, but then you're also uh, talking up to senior leadership that's above you. There was no senior leadership. And so there was a period there we were just trying to figure out, like, what are we doing? What are we going to do? I mean, for your listener, Imagine if you right now walk into your office, you hit pause on this podcast, you walk into your office and there's no leadership, and all of a sudden, everything, all responsibility of your organization sits at your desk. That's just a heavy, heavy weight. Some people
Yeah.
will be like, man, I wish that would happen. No, you don't. Because there, I mean, even though I was in middle management, there were still things that our senior leadership dealt with that I didn't know about and didn't see. I mean, that's part of leadership. Um, there are responsibilities that they have that are not mine. And so I didn't know the weight of that. And all of a sudden, I felt it. And it was pretty crushing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a heavy burden, heavy
Mm.
weight. And I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust where I was emotionally and spiritually. I knew that I could not carry that load. And so, yes, I did resign. And man, when I resigned, you would think, hey, family's loading up, we're moving back to North Carolina. But that's well, that wasn't in the plan, God's plan. And very, very quickly, my wife and I sensed that in our heart. It's a weird place to be after serving in church for almost 30 years to find yourself all of a sudden, I'm not serving anywhere. I don't even know where to go. I don't even have a church to go to because ultimately it dissolved. Um, I just turned 50. God, seriously, this is how this is playing out because this is not the way that I thought my quote unquote professional life would lead. Um, it was pretty dark and pretty heavy. And as I started looking around, because as men, um, I think there's a sense of we need to provide for our families. And so as men, I had that thing in my heart, like I got to get a job financially. I got to provide for my family. And, the cost of living here in New England, it's high. And oh gosh, what am I going to do? And as I started looking on Indeed and looking through different job postings, I felt even more inadequate because I was like, how am I going to take my ministry resume and
Right.
apply somewhere? Like, I don't even know. I can't even fake it at this point. I've been in too long. So, what am I going to do? And, it was just a lot that came at us.
Okay.
And
So you went from the pressure of the weight of the church leadership, you left that, and then you felt the pressure and the weight of what's next and
yeah,
having to take care of your family.
yeah,
So it's kind of like out of the frying pan and into the fire, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of questions and
Yeah.
didn't feel like I was getting a lot of answers in those
Right.
moments.
So, how did you and Holly process all of that together? Because obviously, she was probably your only person that you could
Yeah,
really connect with.
yeah, she was. And even more so, I mean, we still had one daughter in the home. My oldest daughter had moved, and so we still had one daughter in the home. And so you're trying to be strong, trying to hold your head high. Um, but man, she could sniff that out.
Yeah.
She like mom and dad, they are struggling.
Yeah.
But Holly and I, um, we took a lot of car rides, a lot of walks, had a lot of conversations. We cried a lot um, because this happened to people that we cared about. This happened to a church that we cared about. Um, it was a loss. I mean, it was grieving a loss for sure. I was still confused, still didn't know who to trust. And that's why my number one, my ride or die was Holly, my
Yeah.
wife. And, you know, but she had never been through anything like this. This caught her off guard as much as it did me. And you feel like a very small percentage of people in America that has gone through this. And so, but I didn't know who they were. I felt like if I could just talk to someone who understands, maybe they can help me through it. If somebody who's been through this can just tell me the path, I will walk it because I do not want to be here. But ultimately, the only thing that Holly knew was care for pastors. And that's why she just kept reiterating, you need to call. You need to call. She didn't bug me about it because she knew that I would call once I was ready.
Hmm.
But she just kept it in front of me. And ultimately, that's when I made the phone call.
Right. So when you made that phone call from the empty parking lot in a cold New England winter day, what did you hear when you made that phone call?
I, in the brief few moments that we had, because you didn't want to go too deep on that phone call, you wanted to set up a session and just kind of get me in the system. But there was, I felt like a lifeline. I won't say hope yet, because it was just, it was a phone call and the guy just wants to talk to me. So that's a start. And I felt like, okay, I have this pool noodle under my arms and I can kind of keep myself above water a little
Right.
bit. And once, um, once we began talking, you asked me, what are, what is your goal? What is your goal from our time together, our counseling for care for Pat? What is your goal? And I just remember telling you I was so angry, but I do not want my family to get it. And if I get back in the pulpit, I don't want it coming out there. So
Hmm.
I have to process this anger, and it needs to go to the right people.
Right.
And that's where our conversations began. And the more we talked, um, the more hope that I felt like I'm going to survive this. I will be able to come out on the other end, and uh, we're going to be okay. I'm a person that I live in my head a lot. I have a lot of conversations in my head, and I write some great stories in my head, and I would say 98% of them aren't even true.
Yeah.
They never happen the way that I write them in my head.
Right.
And my wife knows that. She knew that if I stayed in my head with that anger, and it would wreck me.
Hmm.
And so I knew that, man, this does not belong with her. It's not her fault. This does not belong with my girls, and it doesn't belong with people who sat under my leadership or my teaching, um, because they're kind of clueless as well. So where does it go? How do I process it, and how do I deal with this? And so I remember we were meeting, I think, twice a week to begin with for quite a while. And there were a lot of days I beat you to the call. We had to, jump on remotely, and I was there waiting, because I was ready to go. And then there were some days that, man, I wish this was another day, because you just you have to go through it. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to fight that fight that day, and I didn't want to look inside myself that day. But slowly, I began to feel that sense of hope.
Yeah. What did you discover about yourself?
Um, I think I'm stronger than what I gave myself credit for.
Okay.
And I don't say that arrogantly, because I definitely don't want to go through that again to test it.
Right.
Going through that, I realized that I was able to go through, but I think there's a lot of strength in bringing others alongside you.
Hmm.
bringing I mean, the strength to recognize you can't walk this journey by yourself. And
Right.
so Care for Pastors was a part of that journey with me. Obviously, my wife was a part of that journey with me. I had one or two very close friends that walked that journey with me. But ultimately, I have to do the walking.
Right.
I mean, if I didn't listen to what you were encouraging me to do and reading the books that you encouraged me to read and doing the homework and having the conversation, I mean, so I realized, like, you know what? I am whooped right now, but I'm not dead.
Right.
And so keep moving. I have learned from a spiritual standpoint, man, God's word is true.
Mm.
And that sounds so basic, really.
Right.
Like people that might be taking notes are like, seriously, that's what you got? But there's truth to it.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us are public speakers, and so we have said things from the platform that are these little nuggets that maybe we've heard on social media or we've heard from a mentor or we heard while we were growing up and we thought, you know what, that sounds good. That might be some clickbait. That might get an applause. I'm going to put that in my speech, my message, whatever.
Right.
And I'm not even saying that's wrong or what we're saying is wrong. But when you say it based on a perspective because you've lived it and you recognize that God says, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you, and you've lived those moments where you felt like you're the only person in the world that's gone through this, when you live those moments where you remember his word that says you will mount up on wings as eagles, um, you will walk and you're not going to be weary. When you remember that God has given us the gift of the Holy Spirit, that for some reason you're sitting in the middle of this tornado and you feel a sense of peace and you feel comforted and you feel the prayers of people and churches, and all of a sudden you have this wisdom of what to do. You don't have the whole runway lit up, but you just have the step right in front of you and recognize God's Spirit is with me. I mean, those are lessons that I reminded myself of, that I learned, that I treasure. And going through something as drastic as I did kind of helped me re-see it.
Right. Amen. That's good perspective. What did you do with your anger?
Um, I wrote letters.
Okay.
I wrote letters to the people that I felt like I needed to talk to,
Mm-hmm.
and the people that I felt like I needed to hear from. And I rewrote letters and I wrote them again and I
Mm-hmm.
changed the draft and I was like, no, I can't be putting that cuss word in there. I can't do that. I got to delete all that.
Yeah.
Uh, no, but seriously, I wrote a lot of letters and my wife and we kind of talked about them back and forth and I would read it and I would rewrite it. And ultimately I had a one-on-one with each of the people that I felt like I needed to meet with.
Mm-hmm.
And I let them know that I had written this and I wanted to because I wanted to make the most of this time that we had together and and I read those letters and at every opportunity um I found healing and a restoration process beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say every most of the ones that are like super super important.
Right.
um and so I just began to realize, like, you know what, there's certain things that I'm not responsible for and that it's not my burden to carry,
Right.
and the only thing that I am responsible for are my actions.
Hmm.
even through this, my actions is my responsibility. And so I felt like I needed to sit down and have some personal conversations with some people. And I cannot, I mean, just, I felt like I lost 1,000 pounds
Mm.
after that whole process because just the weight, anxiety, just, anticipation, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I could just feel it leaving my shoulders. And like I said, there's been some very beautiful things that have come from that. Um, and it hasn't necessarily been a God answered prayer because I don't know that I was really praying specifically for X to happen or Y to happen or Z to happen, but God used those things to bring about healing and restoration and forgiveness and some of those bigger rocks that I knew I was looking for.
Sounds like you put Matthew 18 to practice.
Absolutely.
Wh-
Uh,
Why do you think that's
absolutely.
so hard for us to do?
I don't think we like confrontation.
Yeah.
And I don't think, again, one thing that I've learned is that confrontation can be healthy, as long as it's done in an appropriate way. But I think also, um, you don't have to agree with me, and everything doesn't have to look the way that I expect it to look for us to just coexist, right?
Right.
Like some friends of mine and some people that are involved in this, they may look at things differently, and that's okay. That's that's their prerogative. That's their unique personality. The full agreement. Uh, I think you got to leave some space in there for people to be themselves and people to be people. And so, I think a lot of times if we go into this situation and we feel like, okay, I'm going to talk with this person, then we're just going to see eye to eye and every dot is, dotted and T is crossed and everything looks exactly the same. I don't know that that's true, but I think on the non negotiables, there's an agreement there. And um, on the things that matter, like, hey, we're in unison here. Our hearts lined up. Like these are the big rocks that we know we're going to agree on. And then there's some fluff around the fringe. We give some space for that.
Right.
And but I mean, it's hard to sit down with somebody. It was hard to sit down with some people and say, "You hurt me. This hurt. I didn't see it coming. My family's hurt." But I can tell you it was such a healing process when people that I cared about and still care about said just simply, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And it wasn't a "I'm sorry, but" it wasn't anything other than "I'm sorry."
Mm. It took you a while to get there, didn't it?
Oh yes. Yes, it did. It took a long time to get there. And I I I think you and I had talked about it, yeah, because you kept asking me, what's your next step? What's your next step? And I knew that this conversation was inevitable, because I knew I had to clear the air. I, kn- I wasn't even really looking for answers. I wasn't looking for all every letter began with this. This conversation is not for you. It's for me.
Yeah.
That, that- that's how it
That.
started.
Yeah. That's interesting. What I don't want to play what if, but I'm going to ask you a what if question. Okay, let me just say this: where would you be now if you had not gone through that process?
If I would not have had those conversations.
Yeah, if you'd not
Yeah.
had dealt with it,
Yeah.
because a lot of people bury stuff like that, right,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah. So I would not experience the joy that I'm experiencing.
Okay, that's good.
Uh, Not happiness, the
Right,
joy,
right.
because the happiness comes and goes. But I wouldn't experience joy. I don't know that I would be able to. I don't know that I would be as healthy, mentally clear,
Mm-hmm.
physically. I'm working to get healthier, but
Right.
I think I would just feel differently, just in my head and my heart. Um, but ultimately, I don't think it would be finished. I would be stuck. I would be
Mm.
stuck 2 years in the rearview mirror, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be there. I didn't even like the process, but I definitely don't want to be stuck there.
Right.
And so I knew that I had to have these conversations for me to move forward. And I was already resigned to the fact that maybe restoration wouldn't happen, maybe forgiveness wouldn't happen. I'm not responsible for those things. I'm responsible for having this conversation and communicating how I feel because if and what I think, because if I don't do that, it will live inside my head for a long time. And
Right.
if it's living inside my head and if it's living inside my heart, it's controlling me. It's controlling my future leadership decisions. It's controlling how I see people that I will lead in the future. It's controlling how I respond to my family and my girls. It controls the level of my response. When you're like, bro, I mean, you're coming in at a 10. That should be like a 2.
Right.
Well, it's because there's something deep down there that's not dealt with. And I didn't want to go through that. I didn't want my family to go through that and be damaged, all because I wouldn't do something hard.
Hmm. A lot of times we avoid the hard thing, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, but I I think the things that mean the most to us and the things that truly matter require some hard things. And I guess early on, when you asked me what my goal is, I didn't want my family to get this anger. That's because they mean the most to me. So I've got to do something hard so they don't get that anger and they don't get the blowback from it. And so the something hard to me was kind of approaching that confrontation, approaching those conversations, approaching, you know, people that I cared about. I still do. And having a conversation that was difficult. And you know what I found out too, Robbie? It wasn't just difficult for me, but it was difficult for them. But they were willing to sit through that difficult as well. They were willing to come and talk with me, and they were willing to have a hard conversation too. And I didn't see that at the time, but I saw that later on. Like, you know what? Everyone that I asked showed up. And I mean, that should say something.
It
And
does. Yeah.
so, um, you recognize those things, and I didn't want to miss that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Great advice. Great insight. Um. So where has God taken you and Holly over the last few years since that time?
Well, as I mentioned, when everything really kind of dissolved, boy, you talk about a get out of town free card. I mean, it would have
Right.
made sense to everybody. They would have helped us pack up and lovingly sent us off and all the things. We found ourselves a week after we didn't have a church to go to, so we went online at a friend of mine's church. And I'll never forget the the service ended and my wife's sitting on the couch and I was sitting in my chair and she said, I can't do this long. We are not meant to just watch church online. And but we knew, both of us knew in our gut that we were not released. We didn't have that gut feeling to leave New Hampshire. we I felt responsible, kind of spiritually responsible for a group of people that I was leading in at our campus, and but we didn't know what to do. I knew emotionally I was not ready to jump back into ministry and jump into leadership, but there was just this tug. We were kind of caught in the middle. And so I chose, a few weeks later, we chose to do a Bible study. We hosted a Bible study. And we hosted a Bible study on Nehemiah Sunday afternoons at 1 o'clock, which is the dumbest time in the world to plan anything, especially as you're coming into fall and football season. But I chose that time on purpose because I did not want people thinking that I was starting a church because I wasn't ready for it. But we had a good group of people that began to kind of go through that journey with us, and we studied, kind of word for word, line for line, Nehemiah. And God just began to kind of burst some things through that. There's a group of people that have not only gone through that Bible study, but it has now turned into a church plant. And, there have been people that have left and gone into other churches, which I'm grateful for because, I've said many times, New England is the least churched region of America. And so the fact that somebody is going to church is a win, you know?
Right.
And
Yes.
so they didn't just fall into the trenches. They were able to leave the church that I led, and they came into a Bible study, but then they're plugged into another church. And that was great. That's a part of the bigger picture, the big C church. And but there was a group of people that stayed, and they helped us, start a new church here in this area. And God's done some great things through that. I think the biggest thing is that core group of people that we have with us have walked through their own healing process, and they've walked through their own journey of just questioning and experiencing God's love and his restoration and his faithfulness. And they have stories to tell that are just beautiful. And they're building something, and they're there to, kind of, hey, God, this is where you have me right now. And I want to learn more about you, and I want to grow. And they're doing it. We're seeing it happen in front of us. And so it's been a remarkable thing to be a part of. And again, I told you I write these stories. This was not in the script. I
Right.
was nowhere near what I how I would have laid it out, but I wouldn't trade it for the world because the things that God has shown us and the things that we have experienced it's something to be treasured.
Right. So I guess what I'm hearing from you is healing doesn't come in isolation, but in community.
Absolutely. Um, the one of the hardest things about going through something as public as I did, there is a kind of a reaction to just withdraw and close up.
Hmm.
And I had to fight against that. And to be quite honest with you, I still have to fight against that at times. There are still things that come up, and I've talked to you about it. I have, sent you an email saying, "Hey, I think we need another session. Let's jump in." And you've kind of helped me through some of the things that linger. And it's much like a loss of a family member or a loved one. I mean, the
Yeah.
grief process, there's not a timetable on that.
Right.
And so I find myself a couple years after this, I mean, there's still this thing inside me that's like, no, withdraw, close up, hide, retreat. And the only thing you get from doing that is you're alone. It's the only thing. But if
Right.
you're willing to open up and be vulnerable and willing to allow a few people in and just willing to trust God in that process, I mean, the things you'll experience are truly beneficial for you and your ministry and your family and your future.
So What would you like to tell us that I haven't asked you about yet?
Wow. That's a hard question. I don't know that it's something that you hadn't asked me, but I think I will tell you this is that God's church is a beautiful thing
Mm-hmm.
filled with imperfect people,
Yeah.
imperfect leaders, imperfect members, imperfect staff. But when we rely on Him and when we constantly seek Him, and even though things don't turn out the way we think it will, or the way we have it planned, or the way strategically we have that journey going, if we will just sit back and say, all right, God, I thought I was in charge, but I'm having to realize you are. He will take you places and he will allow you to experience things for your good and his benefit that you can never, ever imagine or plan or create. I think putting myself in this position of just waking up every day and just saying, okay, God, today's yours. I know that I'm going to go work. And I know that I'm going to come home and I know that I'm going to plan some stuff for church. But everything else, man, that's you. And just really giving control and direction to him rather than me getting in front and taking control and direction to say, okay, God bless what I'm doing. That's been a big shift for me that I've learned. I've been able to experience in this. And when things were ripped away, thankfully, with the help of Care for Pastors, my wife, a couple of people that are around me, they helped me build something a little bit differently, build my life a little bit differently to where, um, it's not me in front of him asking him to bless my plans.
Right. Wow. I don't know if I could end the podcast any better than that, Shane, because
Well,
that is a heart of surrender that a lot of people are afraid to do.
yeah,
And they only do when everything's been taken away.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I was that guy. I mean,
Yeah.
you just described me, and it wasn't. I don't think again it's out of ill motive of my heart. It wasn't,
Yeah.
even the people that are listening to you. I think sometimes we just get leadership out of balance,
Yeah.
and we're natural leaders. I mean, we're going to take the ball and we are going to run with it.
Right.
I just think a lot of times we get ahead of God, and His timetable is not ours.
Right. Amen. Well, Shane, I want to say thank you for being willing to share your story with us today. It's been encouraging. It's been I've learned a lot. Just some of the things that we've talked about today, I forgot that
Yeah.
we walked through, and but you certainly didn't, and that's great to hear. Well, my friend, I want to say thank you for your time with us,
Yeah.
and
Hey,
is
it's
there
it's my pleasure. It's my
yeah,
pleasure. I'm still at that spot where it's even though it's a couple years, it's fresh to tell the story. But I truly hope that the things that I've learned will help someone listening today, someone to be a better leader, a better husband, a better spouse, better wife, better parent. And man, I'm just glad I am where I am, and a lot of that is because of Care for Pastors.
yeah. Well, Shane, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye. Well, that concludes our podcast for today and for this first season of the Care for Pastors podcast. Would you please join us in September as we kick off our second season of the Care for Pastors podcast? Until then, if you need any support or encouragement, please reach out to us at careforpastors.org. Thank you very much.